of the things that I like to do as a pure academic, as a pure civilian, I've never been in the military, is to try to help my students who've been in the military for a long time understand how civilians think and all the things that they don't understand about military affairs, about warfighting, about planning, about the entire spectrum that is the realm and the wheelhouse of the military professional. There are lots of things that civilians simply don't get because they've never been in the military and they've never been anywhere near a battlefield. So they don't always understand just how complicated wars are, just how difficult they are, the effect of huge stress. There's nothing really like it in the business world. You might do lots of complicated operations, maybe air traffic control. But folks in the civilian world don't do air traffic control when people are shooting at you. That makes it a completely different enterprise. And we need to help our civilian partners understand how hard it is to operate in a world where there's so much uncertainty, where so many things can go wrong. And the kinds of planning and the kind of robustness that you need to have in your planning for the array of contingencies that can face you in a war. You go in with an initial plan, but then once you encounter the enemy, you don't know where things will go from there. And you need to be really prepared for all kinds of contingencies and circumstances. I think civilians need to appreciate that more. They need to appreciate things like logistics, like terrain, geography, weather, a whole array of things that they don't always instinctively see the way a military officer will when he or she thinks about a problem, because they've got that experience of working in a pretty chaotic, pretty unpredictable realm, whereas civilians are mostly working in the business world in a fairly predictable civilian scenario that's quite different from warfare and warfighting. History is a great field to be trained in for teaching in the professional military education system. Students really learn by looking at the past, looking at case studies, delving into why events occurred in the past, how people thought about those events, why they thought what they thought at the time, and then they wrestle with all of those questions, and it helps them learn to ask really important critical questions. It helps them learn to analyze the past, but also sharpens their analytical skills for application to the present day. So when we use a historical case study, we're teaching students what was really important. What questions did those folks ask themselves about what they were doing? What did they get right? What did they get wrong? Why did they get things wrong? What cognitive filters might they have been wearing that prevented them from seeing things more clearly at the time? What information were they missing? Was it information that they could have had or information that they simply could not have had at the time? And then when students have all that in front of them, they're anxious to really debate and discuss and figure out why these folks did what they did. And it helps them then empathize with actors in the past, to understand why people do something in a very complicated situation, why they make a particular choice, even when it's a very difficult scenario, why they might choose A rather than B. So I think history has been hugely important for me in terms of how I teach my students and how I present material to them and how I work to sharpen their critical thinking skills. I also love to share my research. So for instance, right now I'm writing a book about the Second World War and sort of all aspects of America in the Second World War. And I love to tell my students what I'm learning, how individuals interacted, how the president interacted with his subordinates, how he interacted with George Marshall, who was basically his primary military advisor, how he thought about air power in the war, how he thought about land power, how he thought about the Navy. I'm interested in his relationships with Churchill, with his closest advisors in Washington, how those interactions had outcomes that really shaped the nature and the course of the war. So again, the work that I'm doing in archives, I can pick up and bring directly into the classroom. And it's very exciting to do that. It enables me to take these personalities who were so vivid in the past and who are so vivid to me now and convey the essence of what they were doing and thinking in the midst of a huge crisis, the very huge crisis that was the Second World War.